What would happen if Gandalf suddenly got dropped into the Game of Thrones universe? Well, I gotta tell you, I've done quite a few of these videos in this series, but this question, this what if, has probably been the most fascinating to research. I spent days just diving into the lore of not only Gandalf, but particularly Game of Thrones, and particularly the Night King. As you'll see as I work through it, Gandalf in Game of Thrones really turns into a Gandalf versus the Night King kind of scenario, which has opened up all kinds of interesting questions about what exactly is the Night King's powers. Where do they come from? Because I need to know what his powers are if he's going to go up against Gandalf. And I'll say, I was not particularly thrilled for the final season of Game of Thrones coming up in a little while, but now I kind of am. You know, maybe the show might actually have some surprises to throw at us. I can dream, can't I? Come on, just let me dream. So let us discuss what if Gandalf was in Game of Thrones. Now in the What If series, we operate by Terminator logic. Just like in the Terminator franchise where a portal opens, a guy drops out, he's got no technology, he's got nothing with him, and he just has to rely on his wits, his physical abilities, and his natural skills. And in the case of Gandalf, he's dropping into a universe that really isn't that different from Lord of the Rings. And I know that might seem a little strange to say at first glance. You've got one universe that's filled with sex and violence and all this political wheelings and dealings, but it's really not that different from Lord of the Rings. While there might not be any sex in that, and while the violence is nowhere near as hardcore as Game of Thrones, it's still there, as is the political wheeling and dealing. Again, it's just the volume is turned down on it. But when you look at how Gandalf operates in the Lord of the Rings universe, in both The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, Gandalf plays a role as the one guy who understands that there's a serious threat coming on the horizon, and lots of other people in Middle-earth might not understand this, but he's the one who goes out there and rallies people, gets people together to combat this threat. He comes up with a plan to get this threat and annihilate this evil force threatening to take over Middle-earth. Game of Thrones, very similar. There's an evil force out there massing up in north of the wall, and if Gandalf was thrown into that environment, he would do what he always does. He would go around, he would rally support, he would get everyone to stop bickering amongst themselves, or he'd help to settle those disputes, to get everyone together so they can have a united front against the Night King, against the White Walkers, because he will understand what this dangerous threat is. I mean, after all, if someone like Jon Snow, who's got the personality of a block of wood, is able to rally people together against the Night King, surely Gandalf, who is extremely charismatic and extremely powerful in his speech and just his raw magical powers and his ability to persuade people and understanding how people think to get them to do what he needs for the greater good, and absolutely he could get together all of the Seven Kingdoms to go up against the Night King far better than Jon Snow ever could. One of the things about Gandalf's abilities, because he's actually a Maiar, which is an angelic being that can take physical form, he is extremely powerful, but he's taken the form of an old man so as not to freak out everyone else around him. And him being an old man, it's also a sign of his humility. It makes it easier for people to listen to his wisdom, because I think, he's an older guy, he understands, and being older and seemingly physically frail, people are not threatened by him as much. But he is wise. He's very, very wise. He has almost an encyclopedic knowledge of everything in Middle-earth, which I suppose would not really be of any use to him in the Game of Thrones universe. It's a completely different universe. But he still, through his vast intelligence and his understanding of human nature, it's been shown in Middle-earth that this does give him the ability to accurately predict other people's actions ahead of time. So he'd actually be a little bit Littlefinger-ish in this regard, or perhaps Varys would be a better description, because Varys is a bit friendlier in the TV show. An example of Gandalf doing this is how he handles Theoden. I mean, first Sauron has got his mind poisoned and he's using Wormtongue to sort of whisper in his ear. So first Gandalf gets Wormtongue out of the way, then he casts out Saruman, and once he regains his senses, you see some of Gandalf's Machiavellian ways. He knows now the next step is you got to deal with Wormtongue, you got to kill him. So he sort of manipulates Theoden into doing that by saying you would regain strength faster if you grasped your sword. And once he does, it's very easy for him to then go over and kill Wormtongue. Of course, he sadly doesn't kill him, he just kicks him out. But it shows Gandalf's manipulation. And later on, we see Gandalf is actually sitting next to Theoden, whispering in his ear in the same kind of way as Wormtongue was. He's kind of taken the Wormtongue role now. So Gandalf has the wiles to compete with some of the best strategists in in Game of Thrones, I believe. You combine his understanding of human nature and his intelligence with also his ability to see what's happening in the spirit realm. This was how he was able to see the lingering effect of the Mongol blade on Frodo. He was able to see that Frodo was affected by that, so he could take steps to help Frodo out. He can like sense dangers that are coming like through the spirit realm. That's one of the reasons why he was the first one out there who was like, Sauron is on the way, we got to do something about this. So would his vision enable him to sort of see the Night King as well? Would this make him kind of like a Bran, where Bran can see visions of past, present, future and different things? Well, the visions work a bit differently in Game of Thrones. See, the visions that Bran gets is through the weirwood network. These trees, the weirwood trees, they can see and hear everything around them, and everything they see and hear is kind of uploaded, for want of a better word, into this weirwood network where all the trees create like a web all across Westeros, and they store memories of all these different events that have happened over thousands of years. And the children of the forest, when they would die, they'd do some kind of ritual where their memories would go into the tree as well. So at the risk of sounding a little blasphemous, it's kind of like in Avatar. But once you understand the mechanics of how Bran is getting these visions, it's quite different than Gandalf getting visions and stuff from the spirit realm. In fact, you could say it's even in a way a bit more scientific in Game of Thrones. I mean, there's an actual kind of physical circuitry there that you can sort of tap into and upload and download memories. So would Gandalf be able to learn the skill of being able to tap into these weirwood networks, these weirwood trees, and get these visions and get an idea of who the Night King is and that he's rallying an army and all this? I think it's pretty safe to say he could. I mean, if Bran, who's just a regular ordinary person, can be born with these skills, surely Gandalf, who is a angelic creature of pure magic, I'm sure he could pick up the skill pretty easily. I mean, consider how Bran has to touch the root in order to get the memory of the weirwood tree. In a similar way, we saw Gandalf, when he touches the ring, gets a flash of Sauron's eye. So they're kind of equivalents. I'm sure Gandalf could figure it out. So if Gandalf has the capacity to see the Night King coming and has the skills necessary to rally all of Westeros to push back against them, how would he then make that action? What would he actually do to try and stop the Night King? Now, this is where it gets very fascinating. First of all, the less fascinating part is that Gandalf, he describes himself as the servant of the secret fire and the wielder of the flame of Arnor. Fire, flame. Those are two things that are very useful in fighting whites. Or is it White Walkers? I don't know. Whatever the zombie drone version is, fighting those, fire is very useful. In fact, there was an example where Gandalf, when fighting off a pack of wolves, set all of the treetops on fire and hurled fireballs at them to the point where the air actually became so hot that arrows that were fired towards them burned up before it even reached them. That's the force of fire that Gandalf can produce. We can see he can create fire just from the tip of his spear. I mean, fire, that's his thing. Now, as we know from the show, you need dragon glass to take out any of the upper leadership groups of the White Walkers. But again, if Jon Snow is able to get his hands on dragon glass, I don't see any reason why Gandalf couldn't do the same. But as much as a beast as Gandalf might seem in the Game of Thrones universe, here's the big problem. Here's the real fly in the ointment for Gandalf surviving the Game of Thrones universe. When it comes to Sauron or fighting Smaug or whatever it is, in both those cases, Gandalf knows what the evil villain wants, whether it's Sauron or the dragon or whatever. He knows what they want. Like, Sauron wants the ring, and dragon wants to protect his gold. Like, he understands what the bad guys are after, so he's able to formulate a plan to bring them down. But nobody knows what the Night King actually wants. Nobody knows. Which is why there's so many interesting theories out there all around YouTube and all around the internet about what does the Night King actually want? Does he just want to turn the whole world to ice? Turn everyone into his zombie slaves? Or is he coming south for a specific reason? All those secretive crypts that are underneath Winterfell. Are there some White Walkers locked up in there? Maybe the Night's Queen kept in prison under Winterfell that he's looking for? Does the Night King have some kind of connection with the Stark family? Does he need something there? Does he need a baby of Stark blood or something like that to keep the White Walker line going? Or is the reason that he's suddenly coming south of the Wall now, as opposed to all the other time when he didn't, has it got something to do with mankind violating a peace treaty that they made with the Walkers at the time that the Wall is up? All of these are these great fan theories that are out there that have actually got me interested in the final season of Game of Thrones now. But it brings up the problem of not knowing what the Night King wants. How can you combat an enemy when you don't know what they want?
Always keep your foes confused. If they don't know who you are or what you want, They can't know what you plan to do next.
To combat the Night King, Gandalf would have to find out what the Night King wants. And the only way he could find out what the Night King wants would be to access the Werewood network and try to piece together the clues of what this guy wants. But here's the problem. The Night King can also access the Werewood network. Remember when Bran Stark was in the Werewood network and he saw that vision of the Night King and all of his zombies? And the Night King recognized him. He saw him in the network and he touched him, marking him, which enabled him to sort of trace his ISP, I suppose you could call it, to find his location. So both the Night King and Bran were in the Werewood network, but I presume because the Night King's been around for thousands of years longer, he's far more advanced at using the network. He was able to mark Bran and trace him back to his point of origin and then go and attack him where he was. Gandalf, as skilled as he might be, could figure out a way to navigate the Werewood network, but since he's new to this universe, would he be able to navigate it as well as the Night King? I seriously doubt it. So if Gandalf goes into the Werewood network and he's poking around trying to find out what's happening with the Night King in his past, the Night King is not going to let him do that. And let's not forget that Gandalf's victory over Sauron was not due primarily to winning military battles. In fact, on two of the biggest military occasions, his side actually lost. The victory came from outside third-party groups, Deus Ex Machina style, showing up and saving them at the last minute, whether it's trees or ghost armies or eagles or whatever the case may be, because in the Lord of the Rings universe, the good guys get lucky like that. But of course, as we know from the Game of Thrones universe, the good guys are certainly not lucky. So Gandalf could not rely on pure military strength in the Game of Thrones universe to win the battles. He couldn't even rely on that in the Lord of the Rings universe. He beat Sauron through his knowledge of Sauron and what Sauron wants. It was throwing the ring in the volcano that defeated Sauron, not military battles. And this is why, as strange as it may sound, I do not think Gandalf would be successful in a battle against the Night King, because he doesn't know what he wants. He doesn't know how to defeat him, and I don't think militarily you can defeat the Night King. Every one of your soldiers that gets killed gets reanimated as a walker through the Night King's advanced warging techniques, which that's pretty much what reanimating these zombies is. It's warging in the same kind of way that Bran warged into the mind of Hodor. The Night King is able to warg into minds of people recently killed. It's just advanced warging. Again, just like Bran, which is why there's a lot of theories about that maybe Bran somehow is the Night King, but we'll have to wait and see if that happens or not. But as far as Gandalf versus the Night King, I don't think he can win militarily, and I don't think he can win by attacking the Night King's vulnerability or his source of power or taking away what it is that he's after, because he doesn't know. So I think Gandalf in Game of Thrones, he'd do a great job of rallying everyone together. He'd put up one hell of a good fight, but in the end, he would lose. So let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I am Bandit. This is Bandit Incorporated. Until next time, I will see you guys in the comments.